What does your job actually pay you per hour? Once you count everything it costs you to have it. Not your salary, not the number on your offer letter, not the figure you'd say out loud if someone asked at a dinner party. The real number, after the commute, after the work clothes, after the stress eating, after the decompression time you need just to recover enough to do it again tomorrow. Most people have never calculated it. Vicki Robin built an entire book around forcing people to, and once you see your real number, you cannot unsee it. This is your money or your life. Picture this. You're sitting in traffic again on the drive home, the same 45 minutes you sit through 5 days a week. You tell yourself this is just what a career costs. Everyone does this. It's normal. You've stopped even noticing the radio host's voice, the same 3 songs on rotation, the brake lights stretching out ahead of you toward nothing. But somewhere underneath that thought is a quieter one you don't usually let finish. Is this actually worth it? Vicki Robin's answer starts with a number most people have never actually run. Not because the math is hard, but because almost nobody ever sits down and asks the question seriously. Take your salary. Now, subtract everything your job actually costs you to maintain. Commuting costs and the hours spent in the car, work clothes, the convenience meals you buy because you're too drained to cook, the things you spend on just to recover from the stress of the job itself. Now, divide what's left by the real number of hours your job actually consumes. Not just the hours at your desk, but the commute, the mental decompression time, the Sunday night dread that quietly eats into your weekend too. For most people, this number is significantly lower than their salary suggests. Sometimes dramatically lower. Robin calls this your real hourly wage. And once you know it, something shifts in how you look at every purchase you make. Picture someone earning $60,000 a year, a number that sounds comfortable on paper. Now, subtract the gas and parking for the commute, the work wardrobe replaced every season, the daily coffee that's less a treat and more a survival tool by Wednesday, the therapy or gym membership that exists specifically to undo what the job does to them. Now, divide what's left by the real hours, commute included, decompression time included, the Sunday evening dread that quietly eats into the weekend too. The number that comes out the other end is often startling, not because the math is complicated, because nobody had ever actually run it before. Here's the reframe this entire book is built on. Money isn't just money. It's a stand-in for something you can never get back. You traded hours of your one finite life. Energy you only get a limited amount of, ever, with no way to earn more of it back, no matter how successful you become, for that paycheck. So, every dollar you spend isn't really a dollar. It's a chunk of your actual irreplaceable life energy, already spent earning it, now spent again on whatever you're buying. Picture standing in a store, holding something you're about to buy. Now, picture that price tag converted into hours of your life at your real hourly wage instead of dollars. A coat that costs $300 might be 8 hours of your real-life energy. A streaming subscription you forgot you had might be costing you a full day of your year every year without you noticing. This isn't about guilt. It's about visibility. Most people have simply never seen the actual exchange rate. Picture 2 people standing in the same store, looking at the same jacket. One sees a price tag. The other sees roughly 9 hours of their actual finite life already spent earning the money to buy it. Neither of them is wrong about the jacket, but only one of them is making the decision with the full picture in front of them. Robin's method asks you to track every single dollar that comes in and goes out, without judgment, just observation. Most people who do this for the first time are shocked, not by one huge expense, but by the sheer volume of small ones, stacking quietly into a sum that explains, finally, where their money has actually been going. Here's the part that matters more than the tracking itself. Once you can see the full picture, you can start asking a sharper question about each category of spending. Did this purchase bring me fulfillment proportional to the life energy it cost? Or did it just fill a moment and then fade? For some expenses, the answer is a clear yes. For a surprising number of others, people realize they were spending real hours of their life on things that brought almost nothing back. A subscription that stopped being watched months ago, meals eaten too fast to actually taste, purchases made to fill a mood rather than a need. The exercise isn't about cutting everything. It's about finally being able to tell the difference between the spending that genuinely added something to a life and the spending that simply happened on autopilot because nobody had ever stopped to look closely enough to ask. Here's where the book moves from uncomfortable to genuinely hopeful. Once you know your real hourly wage and you've tracked your spending honestly, you can calculate something most people never think to calculate. The exact point where your savings, invested conservatively, would generate enough passive income to cover your actual expenses. Robin calls this the crossover point, the moment your money starts working hard enough that you don't have to anymore, at least not for survival. This isn't a vague someday retirement number pulled from a financial advisor's generic formula. It's calculated from your actual spending, which means lowering your spending doesn't just save money. It moves your crossover point closer, sometimes dramatically. Two people earning the same income, one spending freely and one spending deliberately, can be decades apart on this exact same calculation. Picture them side by side, both starting at the same salary on the same day. One spends roughly what comes in, lifestyle quietly expanding to match every raise. The other lives below their real hourly wage on purpose, redirecting the gap into investments that slowly start producing income of their own. 10 years later, one of them is still entirely dependent on the next paycheck arriving on schedule. The other has a number, calculated honestly from their own actual spending, that tells them exactly how much closer they are to never needing that paycheck again. There's a moment late in this book where Robin makes a point that reframes everything that came before it. She argues that the goal was never simply to accumulate the biggest number possible. The goal is enough. A deliberately, honestly calculated amount that covers a life you've actually examined and chosen, rather than a life assembled out of habit and advertising. Sit with that distinction for a second because it cuts against almost everything modern financial culture teaches. More is not automatically better. More, past a certain point, can simply mean more hours of your finite life traded for things that were never actually making you happier. The people who reach financial independence fastest in this framework aren't necessarily the highest earners. They're the ones who did the harder, less glamorous work first, actually seeing where their life energy was going and redirecting it on purpose instead of by accident. That's the real promise of this book, not a shortcut to wealth. A clear-eyed look at the actual trade you've been making every single day, whether you've noticed it or not. There's a quiet honesty in this that most financial advice avoids entirely. Most books promise you'll feel richer if you simply earn more. Robin's argument is colder and ultimately kinder. You don't actually need to earn more. You need to know, specifically, what enough looks like for the life you actually want, and stop quietly overshooting it for things that were never the point. Somewhere in the last few minutes, you probably did a rough version of that math on your own life, your real hourly wage. What a recent purchase actually cost you, measured in hours instead of dollars. That number doesn't demand you change anything today. It just makes the trade visible. And visibility, more than any single piece of financial advice, is usually where real change actually starts. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow. You don't have to sell your car or move into a smaller apartment by next week. The book never asks for that. It asks for something smaller and, honestly, harder. That you actually look at the number instead of letting it stay comfortably vague forever. If this gave you something worth thinking about, subscribe, because the next video on this channel might be the next piece of math nobody ever clearly laid out for you either. See you in the next one.